I get to Bangkok, I go to this hotel, I've already checked in, I go upstairs to get a drink, and all of a sudden, my card's declined. So I go down to the lobby and I go to the ATM and I put my card in the machine and I have zero funds.
Oh, wow.
And I am alone on the streets of Bangkok. And the reason why that happened is because I can't remember the numbers. I forgot to look.
Yeah.
And there I am on a different time zone, completely alone with no money to even buy water. I remember not just feeling like embarrassment and shame, but feeling really frightened.
Yeah.
Like, I am not safe in my own hands.
This is ADHD Aha, a podcast where people share the moment when it finally clicked that they have ADHD. My name is Laura Key. I head up our editorial team here at understood.org. And as someone who's had my own ADHD aha moment, I'll be your host. I am here today with Laura Mears-Reynolds. Laura is an ADHD activist and the host of an amazing podcast, really funny, really, really thoughtful podcast called ADHD AF. As Laura often says in her own intros of the show, AF, if you know what that means, there might be some cussing on this episode. So I just wanted to give everybody a heads up on that.
Thank you for having me. I meant to ask, actually, am I allowed to swear? But here we are.
I figured I'd just give a disclaimer right at the top.
Yes.
You've said you have a sailor's mouth. Is that the expression that we use?
Yes, swearing like a sailor. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's like I'm one of those people that always comes with a little disclaimer.
But again, thanks for being here today. My first Laura that I've ever interviewed. So hello, Laura.
Hello, Laura. This isn't at all confusing, is it?
You have a segment on your show where you talk about the most ADHD thing. So what was the most ADHD thing that happened to you today, this week?
Oh my gosh. It's always like you've just got to try and retrace your steps because there's always something. I don't know if there's ever like an hour of the day where I haven't done something ridiculous. Yesterday, I redid a piece of work that took a really long time because I'd already started it on a different Google Drive and completely forgot I'd already put about 3 hours into it. So I sat ignoring the deja vu going, have I done this before? Until eventually I found it.
I probably did something similar yesterday. I mean, it's only the morning here where I am. So.
The day is but young. Yeah.
The day is but young. Laura, let's talk about your diagnosis. When were you diagnosed with ADHD?
So I was diagnosed with ADHD in January 2022. So I'd originally put my name down on the list for diagnosis with the NHS here in the UK I can never remember, I'm so time blind. But I waited 3 years on the NHS until eventually I was kind of at crisis point. And luckily my husband had changed his job, which gave me access to private healthcare. So I looked to see if that would entitle me to getting a diagnosis, which it luckily did. So I then only had to wait another 3 months.
What was the crisis point? What was going on?
I just was so unable to do anything. I was so depressed. I was so anxious. I had so much shame at how inactive my inability to do anything was making me that I just didn't want to be here anymore. So it really was like proper mental health crisis. And I really genuinely, trigger warning, I wanted to take my life. I very nearly did. And I just couldn't see a way out of the hole that I was in. Even though I knew about ADHD, I didn't really understand the complexities of it. So with that in mind, is some real internalized ableism of, well, okay, this will explain why I have a lot of energy or why, little quirks perhaps, but hadn't really taken on board how much ADHD impacts everything that I do. So all of the things that I carried so much shame for were in some way related to that. And so I literally just hated myself and I couldn't understand. I just felt completely alien and like I was the only person, well, my age, I was 38 at that point, that just couldn't do life.
Can you share with me some specific, maybe ADHD behaviors that were leading you to that place?
So I think a really big one would be my struggles with finances. I just have always really struggled with money, and I've really struggled in employment. So, for example, what I now know as incredibly intense and debilitating RSD meant that
RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria.
meant that I find it very difficult to, or found it without knowing what it was, found it very difficult to be in work environments, because where people were looking over my shoulder, perhaps judging my actions, so many of us, we're so used to getting it wrong that we'll assume that we're going to anyway. So I found that so incredibly intimidating. So I found ways to work for myself, but then at times struggled to motivate myself, struggled to put myself out there, made poor decisions, in business. And so I just constantly really, really struggled with money. And that brought me a lot of shame. And on top of that, this rejection sensitivity that I experienced so intensely made relationships very difficult, because when you don't know what that is, then you believe the things that you are feeling as fact. So you're sort of constantly feeling like a nuisance, feeling embarrassed, taking things very, very personally that perhaps haven't even happened. Never mind the things that have happened. It's the worrying about the perception of things that might happen.
Yeah.
That I was just in this semi-constant, anxious, wounded state that made it very, very difficult to just exist, really.
Yeah. When we talked last, you mentioned that you had a tendency to be overly trusting with people.
Yes.
Can you share more about that?
Yeah, I am incredibly naive, and I can really identify that now. I'm incredibly naive, and I'm certainly not about to change track, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but I'm definitely not in the ADHD as a superpower camp. It isn't for me. If it is for anyone listening, I'm so happy and envious of you, but it's not how I feel about it. But what I can identify is the naivety that I have, this overly optimistic kind of viewpoint and trusting nature of people has opened quite a lot of doors for me. It really has. Particularly in this space and creating ADHD AF and the charity and the events and everything that I've done this last 2 years.
Yeah.
But it does leave me open to feeling quite hurt, because I just kind of assume that everyone is as invested, as enthusiastic, gonna give it their all right beside me and understanding my actions, even if I haven't communicated them very well. I kind of feel like we're all along for the ride, and that, I don't know, everything's just understood. And then it's like you so quickly realize that people have different intentions, different feelings, different beliefs, how we interpret situations. And so I constantly trip myself up again and again and again. I don't really seem to learn my lessons, or I forget them. So every time I go back round again in the same circle, like, oh, this happened again. Oh, brilliant. Yep, I'll definitely learn my lesson for next time. Oh, no, here we are again. And round we go. So, every day's a new day. I think it's really important to know that it's not that, and I think anybody has some like evil ulterior motive and I'm some victim or anything like that. It's just that we are all so different. And even though I know that, and I see that every day in my community and on Discord, online, in every situation that I'm in, I see how easily it is for us to miscommunicate, for misunderstanding, for conflict, for anything, because we are all so very different in our presentation of neurodivergence, in the co-occurring conditions that we can have in different forms, and and the hormones fluctuating and exacerbating symptoms, etc. Like, I know this inside out, but still, my naivety, it trips me up again and again.
What would you say your ADHD aha moment was? The thing that really spurred you on to seek out evaluation and diagnosis?
I went on holiday. I went to Bangkok. I was going to Thailand for a few months, and I started in Bangkok. So I get there and I'm on my own. I was going to the islands to meet up with friends over there. But I get to Bangkok, I go to this hotel, I've already checked in, I go upstairs to get a drink, and all of a sudden, my card's declined. So I think to myself, oh, well, I must have not let them know that, I mean, this is a few years back. I must have not let them know that I've travelled to a different place. So they've put a block on my card because they don't recognise why I'm in Thailand and think it's been stolen. So I go down to the lobby and I go to the ATM and I put my card in the machine and I have zero funds. None. And I am alone on the streets of Bangkok. And the reason why that happened is because I can't remember the numbers. I forgot to look. I forgot to check. This is before internet banking. But, you know, I was 30 years old. Like, I'm not a teenager. And there I am on a different time zone, completely alone, with no money to even buy water. And I remember not just feeling like embarrassment and shame, but feeling really frightened. Like, I am not safe in my own hands.
Yeah.
And I can't even begin to explain this to anybody. Like, this doesn't make sense to me, how I would put myself in this dangerous situation, especially as I'm literally not a teenager. I'm 30 years old. And I had to lie because it was too frightening to tell the story in facts, because I couldn't even get my head around how I'd put myself there. And so that was sort of hanging in the air. And then a friend got diagnosed and she told me that she'd been diagnosed with ADHD. And I was like, oh, okay. Like so many of us, held the stereotype in my mind of naughty little boys. Never thought it could be women, definitely not adults, you know, all the stereotypes of what I thought that would look like was nothing that she was like. So I was like, okay, well, you know, explain this to me. What does this look like for you? And as she was saying all of the things, I was like, well, but I do that and much worse than you. And bit by bit, and just go, well, you know, if you've got it, I've definitely got it. And she's like, yeah, about that? That's literally why I'm telling you. So it was kind of those two things together made up.
She had spotted it in you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because she was ADHD and I'm ADHD AF.
What were some of the things in that kind of list of ADHD symptoms and behaviors that really resonated with you?
I mean, this isn't literally stated in the DSM, but like, what the number one thing that stands out for me always is chaos. It's always chaos. And it doesn't matter how hard I try to make sure that I've done everything right, there will always be a level of chaos to whatever I'm doing. Something will go wrong. I'll have missed a step. I'll have overlooked something that literally changes the whole trajectory of whatever the plan was. So definitely being chaotic, struggling with time, struggling with emotional dysregulation is the really, really big one for me. But I think the things that I was so surprised that I'd actually masked from myself were actually, you know, I didn't realize that I lost things all the time. I didn't realize that I forgot things all the time. I didn't realize any of these things.
Yeah.
And suddenly, bit by bit, you start to realize, oh no, actually, I do that. It is always me that's lost my keys, that has to get an emergency passport, that has to, you know, all of these things that I would never have even noticed. And I have to say, I had spent so much of my life trying to escape myself, trying to escape my feelings of anxiety, which I was literally born with, feelings of, you know, unworthiness, you know, all of the self-loathing or all of the rest of it. I just wanted to escape. So I partied a lot. And so what that meant was that, really honestly, I spent about 20 years hungover. So every single time that I couldn't find my keys, and every single time that I lost something, was late, made a stupid error, ended up letting somebody down, all of these things, I just assumed it was because I was hungover. And it would be like, oh God, that was such a good night. You won't believe it. I've had to leave the house open for 3 hours. You won't believe it. I got lost on my way home again.
Wow.
It was
Yeah.
always that masked my symptoms from me. Definitely. I just thought I was unreliable.
The things like losing keys, losing your phone, losing track of time, those are the things that I think are really easy to brush
Yeah.
off. And it can kind of stack up year after
Yeah.
year. You can blame it on something else. I was hungover, and you
And
have a
everybody
kind
does
of a
it.
vicious cycle going on there. And everybody does it, but then for you, I mean, I think people often forget that the other side of ADHD is that it can get you into sticky, if not very dangerous situations,
Exactly.
like some of the ones that you've
And
described.
it's the overlapping. It's not that, yes, everyone loses their keys
Right.
once in a while. Everybody does something silly, hopefully only once in a while. But when it's literally back to back to back every day, almost every hour overlapping, like that's very problematic and actually debilitating at points,
Yeah, like these little things, they can chip away, like quote, little things, like losing things, being late all the time. They can chip away at your self-esteem and make you feel so much shame over time, which I know is something that you focus on a lot on your show.
Yeah, it's all about the shame, because I think we've really got to just raise awareness about these things, because like you say, for anybody who is late discovered ADHD, and I hate generalizing, but everybody I've spoken to, and that's quite a lot of people over the last couple of years, is they all carry this shame because you've just felt so worthless, or you've not even, have you let people down, which makes you carry shame. You've let yourself down so much. You can't rely even on yourself to keep yourself safe. And this causes so much shame. And it's just that shame cycle is what causes, so many of us to feel so depressed and impact us in so many really detrimental ways. And really, it's so silly, isn't it? Because anybody can make a mistake all day, every day, in any walk of life. Whatever your job is, you can forget somebody's name or do something wrong. So if we can forgive these little mistakes, because we're only human in anybody, well, when you actually have a condition that makes it very likely that you're going to do these types of things very often, really there shouldn't be any shame at all,
Yeah. And I want to go back to what you were saying about the superpower narrative, because I struggle with it too. It's really tricky, right? I understand why some people use it. I think it can be really powerful, maybe especially for kids, for, if you, have the privilege to really lean into that. What I don't want to happen is to water down the difficulties that ADHD can have. And I also don't want to have a really dire interview with you. You're such an effervescent, wonderful person. But I think it's important that we're showing.
Yeah.
We want people to be able to see that, number one, they're not alone. And number two, like, this is related to these kinds of things that you feel shame about are related to what's going on in your brain.
I really, really struggle with the superpower thing, because I believe that it is toxic positivity. So if, somebody is really struggling, if somebody is in the depths of co-occurring depression, really feeling a lot of shame and self-loathing, to be battling with something that is branded as your superpower, well, that's a hell of another lump of shame to load on people, isn't it?
Yeah.
But what I would, you're failing at that too. So what I would say,
why aren't you flying around getting millions of things done with your amazing hyperfocus?
Because I lost my cave.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about it, and actually when it comes to kids, it does make sense. I think that the superpower thing is probably a really useful analogy to help a child understand their differences. So on that level, I can understand it. However, for me, I'm so incredibly lucky to be here, and statistically speaking, we all are. And I know that's very bleak, but it is a fact. And I just feel that we've all been let down so much. If you have only discovered your neurodivergence later in life, you have likely been through a hell of a lot. And so it's kind of time now to kind of have this, well, it's like having a whole new life, but we need more acceptance, more compassion, and more understanding, and for the ADHD diagnostic system to improve, because, as I say, people like myself have been failed enough. And it's, we really have been in some dangerous situations, and that's really got to stop.
How do you think your life would have been different had you been diagnosed with ADHD earlier?
I think that the really big one for me that I can see as my personal struggle, and we all struggle with different things, but is relationships. And I think that, I would be closer to people that I care about. I wouldn't have lost people along the way. I think that that's the one that sticks with me. I have got an education. I mean, I've got a really rubbish degree, but I have got a degree. I did all right in education, so I don't feel like it impacted me that much in that way. But in the world of work, like, I realized that the anxieties of interpersonal relationships, miscommunications, etc., that has informed that, and that has held me back in terms of a career, until I started doing ADHD AF. I had nothing really. The couple of things I'd really had a bash at, I'd ended up failing at, definitely because of ADHD, and in not knowing that it was ADHD that had tripped me up in various ways, it just knocked my confidence.
Yeah.
So that was me. I just felt completely inept and ill-equipped, and really, just so alone in it.
I mean, you mentioned ADHD AF, and your life has changed since your diagnosis for the better, I assume. Let's talk about that.
So when I got diagnosed with ADHD, like everybody I've spoken to, there was an element of absolute relief, but there was also imposter syndrome. Like, if you've spent nearly 40 years of your life hating yourself, you're not going to be like, oh, I get a free pass now. None of that was actually my fault. I'm actually a great person. No, you're going to be like, no, you're still the unreliable, worthless person that you were yesterday for a minute. But I did wake up for 1 minute, that first minute after, almost like it was a dream, was like, actually, I don't have to hate myself today. I can work on not doing that. It's not going to go, but I can acknowledge that I don't have to let all of that shame and guilt and self-loathing flood in like it does every morning. So that was nice. And at the same...
so that was nice.
But then at the same time, obviously, we have to go through the process of telling people that you've got it. And that was very, very nerve-wracking, especially at a time when the press is saying, well, this is a trend, and people are hopping on a bandwagon because of TikTok and all the rest of it. It's like, I remember that initial sinking feeling of, oh, I finally got the answer. Oh God, why does it have to be something that I have to defend, that I have to explain, when actually some people already think I'm untrustworthy? So what was that? Of all the things.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
But then for myself, I found a way to do that best. Even though I didn't know the intricacies and the extent of my emotional struggles, I realized that I needed to protect myself in some way. So I went about protecting myself from other people's reactions by literally sending people emails. I found it was the best way to do it. Like, I can write.
Wow. Okay.
So I wrote it all out, and I gave kind of examples, and I gave links to reputable online resources to get them to back me up.
I love this.
And then it kind of just, as it came back, it was like, okay, you know that you have no control over somebody else's response. And so many of us, we spend our time troubleshooting, what's the worst case scenario, blah, blah, blah. So I was like, okay, well, if they come out with something horrible, at least I know that I'm not going to scream and shout at them because they're not right in front of me. And I'm not going to cry and tell them never to knock on my door again. At least there will be a minute's grace for me to write all the expletives and press send, to protect myself and them.
It's also good use of time management, your growing time management skills with your new ADHD diagnosis, right? Maybe you copied and pasted the whole thing and just
that sounds...
You could just send a group send.
I could have just done that. And then from that point, as so many of us do, I hyper-focus hard down that rabbit hole and found out everything there was to find out. And in doing that, I discovered the podcast, the ADHD Adults podcast. And it really resonated with me because they just sounded like two silly blokes that I would meet down the pub. It was even though it was scientific, they're just a bit daft. And it was just like, okay, this is relatable on that level. And I had just moved to this quirky little fishing village by the sea in northeast Scotland for my husband's work. And my neighbour had just found out that she had ADHD in a similar way. And so I said, you should listen to this podcast, and sent her a link to that. And she said, we should start our own. And I'd realised that I wanted to do something. I realised that having spent my life in and out of doctor's surgeries from the age of 14 for depression, anxiety, eating disorders, sleep problems, all these different things, when it came to the diagnosis, to my mind, it's just a different set of questions and a different pot of pills. And I was just like, the doctors just don't know. They don't have the training. The GPs are the gatekeepers for assessment in the UK. And GPs, if you're lucky, have had 1 hour of basic training on outdated and gender biased research. Mm-hmm. So effectively, in order to get assessed, to get the help that you need, you have to convince a person who doesn't actually have all of the facts or understanding of the condition. And that makes no sense, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, somebody just needs to hear me on that level. So I wanted to do some kind of local campaigning or something. So when my neighbour said, let's do this podcast, I was like, that could work. Let's try that way. And next thing you know, people actually listen to us, which was ridiculous.
Yeah, I listened to it. It's great. It's a wonderful show. I want everybody to check it out. Oh, wait, can I ask you, for those who are watching on video, they know you said something earlier about the leopard print gang. Is that what you said?
Yeah, so we're the leopard print army.
Leopard print army. And and Laura is wearing leopard print, in case you're not watching on video.
The podcast started in Scotland, in Aberdeen, Scotland, and the leopard is the symbol of that city. And it also symbolises bravery and the reclaiming of power. And here in the UK, you might have heard of it. We have this thing called Hun culture, Hun. So it's kind of camp. Mm-hmm. I don't really know how to explain it, but I wear a lot of leopard print because I'm a massive Hun. Mm-hmm. So it all just fitted in perfectly, and it's now become like the uniform of all of us ADHD AFers. So we're all like in the trenches together, total Huns, wearing leopard print, and it unites us.
I love it, Laura. Your whole, you bring such a lightness to even some of the more difficult subject matter. And I know that isn't always easy. So
life has been really, really tough, I'm not going to lie. And, there's many times where I've kind of listed all of the ways that statistically, the wrecking ball of ADHD can swing in and bash up your life and take something out. And really, whenever I've listed that, I am literally listing my life experiences. It's always been really, really challenging, and I've been through some really dark and hard times. And the only way I've survived them is by having fun, really. Yeah. And so I just think it all has to be worth something. All of the hard stuff, and you've got to have the good times as well.
I love it. And I have to say, I don't think that you cussed one time.
I know, I've been on my best behaviour that whole time. I'm so not used to being interviewed. I've done a few interviews, but I'm so used to being the interviewer that I'm just sitting here hating myself for being so rude. I'm like, please, will you ask Laura some questions? So Laura, please, will you tell me what is the most ADHD thing you've done this week?
Well, I'm leaving on a trip in 1 hour and I haven't packed a thing. So
wonderful. We don't need things. Who needs things? Toothbrush, that's it, right?
Yeah, I mean, my kids might be mad if I don't pack anything for them, but yeah.
They'll be all right.
It's been really, really lovely to connect with you again. And yeah, I think the world of you, Laura. So I'll be listening to your show.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you for spending this time with me. And good luck with Spain.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I love the work that you're doing. So I'm really grateful to be part of it. So thank you very much.
Thanks for listening today. As always, if you want to share your own aha moment, email us at adhdaha@understood.org or send a message to our voicemail inbox. You'll find a link in the show notes along with resources and links to anything we mentioned in the episode. This show is brought to you by understood.org. Understood.org is a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering people with learning and thinking differences like ADHD and dyslexia. If you want to help us continue this work, donate at understood.org/give. ADHD Aha is produced and edited by Jessamine Molly. Say hi, Jessamine.
Hi, everyone.
And Margie DeSantis.
Hey, hey.
Samaya Adams is our supervising producer. Video is produced by Calvin Knee and edited by Alyssa Shea. Our theme music was written by Justin D. Wright, who also mixes the show. Brianna Berry is our production director. Neil Drumming is our editorial director. From understood.org, our executive directors are Scott Koshier, Seth Melnick, and Jordan Davidson. And I'm your host, Laura Key.